Hey, how is it going? I'm Chris from 99scloud.com. This video is a part of a series that brings you from zero to hero building an AWS HTTP REST API with a React Web Frontend. In this part, we will set up a new React web application, including some libraries such as React Router, Material UI, and Axios. If you are only interested to learn how to set up a basic React application, feel free to follow along, as this video will not depend on any other parts of the series. But in case you want to follow the series, there is a link to the full playlist in the comment section below this video. So if you are interested, stay tuned. Hey and welcome back. In this video we will be creating a basic React application, install some libraries such as React Router, Material UI and Axios, and create some basic project files. In subsequent videos we will then write the code to connect to our AWS HTTP REST API backend. Let's have a look at the agenda so that we know what's covered in this tutorial. First, we will create a new React web application. Then we will set up a folder structure based on React best practices. After that, we will be adding a home component, which is basically the home page, so the page that loads when the user navigates onto the application. Then we will be setting up a basic Material UI theme. After that, we will be configuring the React Router. And then we will be adding an additional component called Nodes and add some files inside. We also have some prerequisites. You will need Node.js installed. This is a prerequisite so that you can use React. And I will be using Visual Studio Code as my development environment, but feel free to use another one. In this first section, we will be going to create a React application and install all the required libraries. So in order to create a new React application, we can type npx create React app, and we will call this nodes HTTP web. Okay, our React application has been created, so we can now change into the projects folder. So we can type cd nodes HTTP web. And in here, we can now install all the libraries. So the first library that we will install is the React Router. The React Router enables us to navigate to different parts of our application. So it's the same concept as with traditional web applications, where we can navigate to different pages. In order to install React Router, we can type npm install React Router DOM, and we will install the version 6. Which is the newest one at the moment. So we can press enter. And this has installed it. Next we will install Axios. Axios is a library with which we can make HTTP connections in order to connect to our REST API. So to install Axios, we can type npm install Axios. That's it. Then next we will install React Hook Form. We will use React Hook Form to create our form to add a new node and update the node. So in order to do that, we can type npm install React Hook Form, enter. Okay, that's installed as well. Next, we will install Material UI. Material UI is a library for the look and feel of your applications. It has a lot of predefined, nice-looking components, and we also have a templating system with which we can style our application very easily. So in order to install Material UI, we can type npm install at MUI/material. Then we will use at emotion/react. We will also use at emotion/styled. And we will use at MUI/icons material, which is an icons library. So we can press enter and this should install all these components. Okay, and with this the first part has been completed. We have installed our React application and added all the required libraries. In this section we will follow React best practices and will create a components folder with 2 components. The first component will be the home component, which holds a default page that will display once we open the application. The default page will have a link with which we can reach the second component, which will be our nodes component that contains all the functionality related to nodes. The cool thing about React is that we can split our code into smaller logical components, which is great if we want to reuse them in other applications. So let's do this. So here we can go into the src folder, cd src, and in the src folder we can create a folder called components. So we can go into the components folder, and here we can create the 2 components. The first one will be the home component, and the second one will be the nodes component. That should be it. So we can go back into the root of our application. And then we can open VS Code and start coding our application. So we can type codes dot. And this will open our VS Code editor. Let's have a look first if we can actually start the React application. So we will just go up here onto View, and then we can open up the terminal. Okay, and here we can type npm start, which should then open our React application. I will just open the browser, and as you can see here, the default application is open, which means that this is working. So we can go back into the Visual Studio Code and close this again for the moment. When we created the application, there were some files installed which we can remove. So we can go into the public directory here, and then we can delete this logo here. Delete, move to trash. We also don't need this. Delete, move to trash. The rest we can keep for the moment, and then we can also go into the src folder And here we can delete this logo SVG. We can delete the index CSS. Delete. And the app CSS, we don't need that as well. And that should be it. So let's go into index.js and have a look what we have in here. So I will just move the terminal down a little. We don't necessarily need this report web vitals, so we will just comment it. And we can also comment this import up here. We don't need the index.css, so we can remove that as well. And the rest should be okay. So we can save this and then we can go into the app.js. And here we can remove this, well, we can just remove this app.css. We can also remove this logo SVG. And then we can delete everything inside here. And here we can just put in a div. And just add app. And now if we start the application, npm start, and go on to the web page, then we should now see app. Okay, so we can see this app, and this is okay. And so this was the first step to clear out our application so that we can have a fresh start. Now that we have a clean slate, let's do some cleanup work and then add a home page. So let's go over into Visual Studio Code. And here in the index.html file, we can just remove all this commented out code. Okay, that looks a little bit cleaner. And then here under home, in the home component, we will add a file called home.jsx. So this will be basically our home page. And this X behind JS means that we will have a mixed file. The file will contain JavaScript, but it will also contain HTML. This is why we put this X to the end. But it would actually also work if you just call it JS. So it's up to you. But I like this because I can see very easily what file is a plain JavaScript file and what file is a React file that also contains some HTML. And then when we were setting up our development environment, we have also set up a React Redux extension in VS Code. If you would not have followed that tutorial, then I'd suggest that you have a look at that on how to install this extension. And once done, what we can do here is we can now use some shortcuts. So I will just type RFC, and this will open a pop-up, and then I can just select this RFC here. And what this does is it will just add some default code automatically. Okay, so now we have this home component. But how do we now actually load this home component? Well, for this we will go back into the app.js, because the app.js will be loaded first once the application is loaded, and it will be loaded through this index.html file, as you can see here. And then, so in here, what we can do is we can just includes our home component into this app component to have it displayed. So here we can just type import home from ./components/home/home. And then here, instead of this app, we can just add home. And with this, when we go back onto the browser, we see now that we have this home displayed here and not the app anymore, which means that this component has been loaded successfully. Now that we have created our first easy component, we will set up the theme through Material UI. So in order to do that, we will go back into Visual Studio Code, and we will go into the app.js file as we want to set up the theme globally. And then what we can do is we can add a few imports, and the imports that we will add are the following: import theme provider, create theme from @MUI material/styles. Okay. And what we will also do is we will import CSS baseline from @MUI material. Yeah, that looks good. And then we will define a default theme, and we can do this by writing following code: const theme equals create theme. And in this theme, we can define a palette, which in our case will be mode :dark. So Material UI comes with certain default themes. One is a light theme and the other one is a dark theme. Or then you could also define your custom theme. I will not cover the details of Material UI in this tutorial, but if that would interest you, then leave a comment in the comment section below, and then I'll be happy to create such a video as well. Okay, so now that we have defined the theme, we will need to create the so-called theme provider to load the theme. So here in the HTML that we return, we will create this theme provider. Theme equals theme. And then this theme provider we can put to the end after home. And that should be it. So we will create our theme up here with the whole palette. And then with the theme provider, we will load the theme and everything that is within the theme provider. So all the components which are within the theme provider will inherit the theme from the theme provider. So that's basically how it works. So I can now save this. And then it's a CSS baseline is defined but never used. That's because we also need to add it. So in order to add CSS baseline, we can just say CSS baseline. And that should be it. Okay, so this error disappeared. So what is CSS baseline? When we go to the definition, it says kickstart an elegant, consistent and simple baseline to build up on. So it will reset the CSS so that it will look the same in all browsers. It will remove the default margins and things like that. So if you want to learn more about it, then you can go onto the MUI website and there you will get more information about what it does exactly. But basically it just makes the CSS look the same in all the browsers. Okay, if we now go back onto the web page, then you will see that this has now turned black because it is the dark theme. So if we go back and we would turn this to light, then as you can see it's white again because this is the light theme. So that's basically how it works. So I will just put it back to dark because I personally prefer the dark mode. And with this we have created a basic theme with Material UI. Okay, so now that we have created our theme with Material UI, we will also need a way to navigate between all our pages. So at the moment we just have this home here, which is loaded automatically. But we will also want some buttons to navigate to different pages. So in order to do that, we can install React Router. So let's import the necessary functions from React Router first. We can type import browser router as router, and we will have routes, and we will have route from React Router DOM. Okay. This will tell us that we have some unused variables, which is okay. We will define them now. So now that we have done this, we can go into our HTML code again. And here what we can define is our routes. So first we load our router, which is this browser router. So we can just say router. And then in this router we will define routes. And here we can then add our routes. So instead of actually having this home component loaded directly in the app component, we can define route path equals /. So that's basically the default path when the application opens. Element equals home. And then we will need to close this. And what we can do now is remove this home down here. Save. Okay, here everything looks okay. And if we go back onto the website and refresh, because we still have this node. So if we go back to localhost 3000, then you can see we still have this home here. So that means that everything is still working, but now we are loading home through this route. And with this router defined, we can now start adding also additional routes. Now that we have integrated the React router, we can start creating the files for our nodes application. So let's create the first file, which is called list.jsx. So this will be the file that will list all our nodes once we hit the /nodes URL. So let's do the same like before. We will just type rfc and create some default HTML. And now that we have done that, we will create the route in our router. So we will go back to app.js, and here we can say route path equals /nodes, and then we can also define the element equals list nodes. Okay, then what we will also have to do is we will have to import, I will just add the home down here to clean this up a little, and then we will also import list nodes from /components/ not home /nodes /list nodes. Save. Okay, we got some error. I forgot to add the closing tag here. Okay, that has worked. So when we go back onto the browser, with this default URL, we still have /home. But if we now go onto the URL /nodes, then you see that we will get onto this list nodes page. So let's do the same also for the other pages that we want to add. We'll also want to create another file called add_node.jsx to add a new node. And we will want to add a file to update the node. So update node.jsx. And then in these two files, I will also just type rfc. And in the update node file as well, rfc. Okay. Then we will go into the app.js again. And here we will just define these additional routes. So we will have a route pass equals /nodes/add. And the element for this will be the add node element. Okay, what did I do wrong? Here I need to route. Okay, and add node is not defined because we will have to import it. We will just do that in a sec, and then we also have this route pass equals /nodes/update. Element is update node. Equals. Okay, now we will need to import these component files again. So import add node from .components/nodes/add node. And then we will also import update node from components nodes update node. Okay, and that looks good. So if we now go back into the browser and we go on to /add nodes/add, then we will get to this add node. And if we go on to nodes/update, then we will see this update node page. Okay, so with this we have defined all our routes. And so now we know how we can navigate between the different kind of pages in our application. This brings us to the end of this tutorial. If it was valuable, I'd appreciate if you could give it a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. If you want to watch the full series on how to set up an AWS HTTP REST API with React Frontend, or check out my website, there are links in the comment section below. Have a good one and see you in the next video.